This is Class 2-1 of the junior high school. Class 2-1 is having a relay race. The second runner accidentally falls, and our male protagonist, Iki, has to make up for the lost ground. He successfully passes the baton to the class president, Natsuko, who is also the fastest runner in the class. She manages to overtake the leading runners and secures victory for the class. A few days earlier, Aki had just transferred to this class. He is seated next to Natsuko, who tries to befriend him, but he constantly avoids her. During class, she shows him a drawing, but he bursts into tears. During recess, classmates approach him to see how he's doing, but he keeps telling them to leave him alone. The more they try to connect with him, the more he pushes them away. Unable to bear it anymore, he runs out of the classroom. Natsuko skips class and follows him, asking why he won't be friends with anyone. He must have gone through something difficult, but he avoids her question again. The next day, the class chooses members for the relay race. Natsuko still invites him to join the team and wants him to have fun with everyone. He hesitates for a moment but eventually agrees. He later hears that Natsuko is cheerful and sociable despite losing her parents in an accident. He doesn't understand why losing someone precious hasn't made Natsuko gloomy like him. He then enjoys himself at the sports festival and hopes that things will stay this way and he can be happy again. But no matter where he runs, it won't let him go. What he's talking about is the King's Game. The rules of the game are as follows. A mysterious figure known as the King sends messages to the entire class, issuing a random command for certain individuals to carry out. Participation is mandatory. They have 24 hours to complete the command. Disobedience results in punishment, and quitting the game is not allowed. The next morning, Aki arrives at class to find that everyone has received a message about the game. They think he's behind it because he likes Natsuko, as the command is for him and Natsuko to kiss. He sees their reaction, just like his previous class, and no one believes him about the King's Game. Natsuko isn't bothered by the kiss, but he tries to explain that there will be more commands and they can overcome them if they cooperate. But he only receives ridicule from the class. When he tries to seriously warn them, they think he's being too intense and show their disapproval. The teacher enters the classroom, and that afternoon, Aki understands that this is normal because no one will believe until there's a victim. Suddenly, a classmate named Amy approaches him, thinking he genuinely likes Natsuko and wants to help. She's willing to give him Natsuko's number, but he apologizes for his earlier words and tells her to go. He then decides that maybe he should just die to escape the suffering. But should he take Natsuko with him? That night, he sits at the basketball court, waiting for his fate, when Natsuko finds him. She thinks he's still upset about this morning, but he wants her to go. The command only has 5 minutes left. She's willing to let him kiss her, but asks if he has a girlfriend. He did, but she's gone to a faraway place. Natsuko then climbs over the fence and sees that there's only 1 minute left. She approaches him, but he keeps trying to move away. She comes closer, determined to help him. She kisses him, as if declaring war on his ex-girlfriend. She has liked him since the beginning and wants to date him. The kiss completes the command, and Amy sees that he seems to be done. But at that moment, the next command arrives. It requires Satoshi, the one who exposed him earlier, to lick Amy's feet. There are other commands as well, but the most important one is that no one is allowed to sleep. Aki tells Natsuko to wake everyone up, but the next message states that 2 people have been penalized. Aki asks her where one of the penalized people lives so he can go there. He asks her to gather everyone immediately. She is the only one he can rely on now. He then runs to the house of one of the penalized individuals and bangs on the door, rushing inside. The father thinks he's a burglar and tries to stop him, but when Aki enters, he sees the young man about to hang himself. Aki stops him and tells the father to call an ambulance immediately. Aki leaves, and soon after, more people are penalized. Those who are still alive have gathered at the park. He returns, and Satoshi still believes this is Aki's doing. However, the truth is that the penalized individuals hanged themselves, and some people witnessed it. Aki confesses that he was once forced to participate in the King's Game, and everyone else besides him died. He warns them not to joke around because he used to be like them, but if they don't follow the commands, death awaits. Amy is upset because Aki initially refused to kiss Natsuko, hoping to drag her down with him. Satoshi punches Aki, and the class calls him a murderer. Amy blames Aki for possibly sending the messages to kill them all. Aki is beaten by the class, but suddenly, Satoshi violates a rule and receives a punishment. He starts bleeding profusely and explodes, dying instantly. Everyone screams in terror, while Aki realizes that the king's game has just begun. He believes that even if they blame him, nothing will change. Now, they have to obey the commands or die. But this also means Netsuko will have to sleep with another classmate according to the command. She refuses because she wants to give her first time to someone she loves, but Aki doesn't care and tells her and the other classmate to decide for themselves. Aki recalls a time in his previous class when someone received a command to squeeze a classmate's breast. Everyone thought he was pranking the class beauty. That night, the punishment occurred, and a new command arrived. 2 classmates had to sleep with each other. Aki thought it was a stupid joke at the time, but the next morning, the teacher announced that the 2 students who were supposed to fulfill the command the previous night were dead. Everyone was shocked and didn't understand what the teacher meant. The class descended into utter chaos. We should pay attention to a girl with white hair named Ria. Everyone starts to doubt the king's game, but the boyfriend of the girl in the command forbids the bespectacled boy from sleeping with his girlfriend, threatening to beat him up. Aki tries to calm him down, but the boyfriend insists that if Aki were in his situation, he would act the same way. That afternoon, Aki realizes that losing friends affects him more than he thought. Suddenly, he and his girlfriend receive a message saying the command has been completed. His girlfriend worries that the punishment will befall them both, but Aki is sure he won't obey. The next morning, as Aki and his close friend Nao Da walk to school, they see the next command. The boyfriend has the right to issue a command to anyone in the class. Arriving at school, they see the boyfriend beating up the bespectacled boy for sleeping with his girlfriend. Aki tries to stop him, but the boyfriend uses his privilege for the day and commands the bespectacled boy to hang himself. The command is sent, and the bespectacled boy, heartbroken, runs away. Aki thinks the boyfriend is going too far, but he's just trying to scare the bespectacled boy. Aki then goes to comfort the bespectacled boy, assuring him that the king's game isn't real. He believes the deaths of the 2 people were just coincidences, but the bespectacled boy doesn't believe it could be that coincidental. Aki shares his dream of becoming a singer with the bespectacled boy, who also aspires to be a singer. Aki decides that tonight, he will go to the bespectacled boy's house to practice, and if he gets punished, he will save him. That night, Aki and Nao Da go to the bespectacled boy's house to play music. They all share a passion for music, and the bespectacled boy's house is well equipped with an electric guitar. The 3 of them jam like never before. As midnight approaches, they anxiously await what will happen. But when the clock strikes 12, they are relieved to see that the bespectacled boy hasn't hanged himself. He goes to get some water, and his girlfriend calls Aki to talk. Just as Aki is celebrating, Nao Da informs him that the command has been completed. Aki panics and rushes to find the bespectacled boy, only to discover him hanging dead in his study. Now, Aki wants everyone to stay close instead of separating. The boyfriend then demands to sleep with Netsuko, but she refuses, insisting on sleeping with Aki first. He doesn't have the power to decide that. Netsuko pleads with him, but eventually, she decides to discard her usual friendly image. She reveals her true self, willing to do anything to survive. She takes her clothes off right here, and now Aki wants to stop her. But she calls him a hypocrite because he intentionally wanted her dead, but now talks about survival. She drags him into the woods to talk privately. Netsuko bluntly tells him that she hates him, accusing him of betraying his friends in the past to survive. Netsuko then screams and falsely accuses him of trying to assault her. Everyone starts to join in to beat him up, believing Netsuko over him. While he's being beaten, she sticks out her tongue and mocks him. She then reveals that their classmate received an order to send death messages to 2 people. Netsuko wants her to send one to Aki so he will die. Everyone now realizes that Netsuko seems like a different person. At this moment, Aki hopes someone will hear and help him. Just then, a young man named Kenta runs up. He sees a dead young man lying there and Aki being beaten by the entire class. Kenta is the only one who dares to stand up for Aki. Netsuko decides to tell the other girl to send death messages to both Aki and Kenta. However, the girl no longer recognizes the usual Netsuko, so Aki asks her to send him one and send the other to Netsuko. She can't bring herself to do it and ends up throwing the phone away. worried about the punishment she'll face. But Kenta plans to take Aki with him, and the girl also asks to come along. Natsuko demands to go too, but Kenta slaps her. Kenta then takes Aki and the other girl away. The girl is still afraid that she will die, but Kenta received the privilege to give any order, so he will order himself to protect her, otherwise, he will also die. Kenta wants to know what happened to Akai, so Aki tells him everything, starting from the beginning. Since he came here, the king's game has followed. Kenta wants to hear the story, so Aki continues the story from after he put on the death glasses. Aki can now confirm that the king's game is real. That morning, the next request was made. Now and another female classmate would be voted on. Whoever got fewer votes would die. Aki decided not to let his best friend die, so he asked his girlfriend to find people to vote. The girlfriend, who wore glasses and had slept with him, was pressured by both Aki and his friend. However, Aki bowed his head to plead for his best friend, prompting his girlfriend to decide to help Aki as if to repay the boy who wore glasses. The other girl couldn't accept her own death and decided to use despicable means to get votes. She used her body to seduce the boys in class, but was discovered by her boyfriend. The boyfriend then apologized to Aki for the previous incident, but Aki didn't blame him. He admitted that he was also partly at fault for not carefully monitoring the glasses wearer until the last minute. Each of their votes would now indirectly kill one person, but also save another. The boyfriend didn't want to owe Aki, so he told him that the girl had used her body to bribe the boys in the class. He went to ask a young man who had been bribed by the girl. He seemed hesitant, so Aki understood. When it came time to collect the votes, Aki read each one aloud, and the votes on both sides seemed to be very close. The girl started to get worried. Until the last vote, she took it upon herself to read it. She was overjoyed when she saw her name, but when Aki read it again, her name was only there to apologize because that person had voted for now. She went crazy and jumped out of the window to her death before knowing that her punishment was only to confess to the person she liked, not death. She was later taken to the hospital and was in critical condition. Aki wasn't sure if she would make it through the night. He then confessed that he had rigged the vote. He had sent messages to the people who were bribed that he could help them get out of the game. And if that was revealed, he would get beaten up badly. But he was prepared for the worst-case scenario because he only sent them an urgent message that only they knew about. And if they told anyone else, it would expose their betrayal and indirectly cause the death of the girl, so they would remain silent. Upon returning home, Aki's group sat down to discuss a few things. Suddenly, the girl in the hospital passed away, so her order was passed on to Now. He would have to sleep with a girl before midnight or be burned to death. With only 10 minutes left, Aki decided to throw his girlfriend and Now into the room to let them do their thing. He was willing to forgive her to save his best friend. Now vehemently refused because he didn't want to betray his two best friends. He would rather die than betray both of them. Aki stormed in and knocked him unconscious so that his girlfriend could take his place. After 12 hours, with no penalty message received, both the boy and his girlfriend could only hug each other and cry. Both were heartbroken over the decision they just made. Kenta, upon hearing the story, couldn't blame Aki, as not everyone could do what he did. Kenta also wanted to beat up the king, believing him to be a true demon. Meanwhile, Natsuko gathered the remaining players to follow her. Noticing Kenta had left his phone, she devised a plan to harm him. Kenta later realized he had left his phone at the park and decided to go back to retrieve it, telling Aki to go to the hospital first. However, Aki wanted to visit a place where, 30 years ago, the king's game was first held in a village. The villagers there had all died, turning it into an abandoned area. He wanted to investigate the place for clues on how to escape the game. Kenta and his friend, Maidu Kai, decided to accompany him. The next morning, they boarded the train, and Aki asked Maidu Kai if she brought her old phone, as they might find a new phone for her. Though Natsuko had threatened her life if she changed phones, they decided to ignore her. They still had no clue about the king's identity. Years ago, Aki suspected the king was someone in his class. At that time, a female classmate volunteered to touch everyone in class, believing that if the completion message appeared, she would find the king. Though aware of the risk of death if her suspicion was wrong, she still chose to believe in Aki. She didn't want to die, but she was willing to take the risk to help Aki and their friends end this game. If this method succeeded, she would become a hero. She also had feelings for Aki, but didn't want to be the third person interfering in his relationship, so she chose to support him from behind with everything she had. The next morning, the test to identify the king began. Everyone thought this girl was incredibly brave to risk her life to find the king. They began to touch each person, one by one, starting with the boys. However, none of them were the king. When it was the girl's turn, Aki noticed a girl named Raya and called her up. She was the most likely candidate for the king, always mysterious and quiet. But when called upon, Raya shockingly declared herself as the king. Everyone was stunned by her words, but she arrogantly challenged them, letting them face the truth that the game wouldn't end until she was still alive. As Aki was the initiator, he would be the one forced to end the king's life. Raya then touched the girl, but nothing happened. This heightened Aki's suspicion of her. Only 5 girls remained, and the situation became incredibly tense. If no one was truly the king, someone would die, and the truth was, no one in the class was the king. The girl started to panic and ran away. Aki's girlfriend told him to go after her. He had to run everywhere to find her, blaming himself for giving her false hope by believing the king was someone in their class. He then remembered the place where people usually went when they wanted to be alone and found her there. He comforted her, assuring her that the penalty might be light. She blamed herself for being useless and unable to do anything, but he still took the blame upon himself. She asked Aki to stay with her until midnight. He stayed by her side throughout those final moments, and she felt content just being with him. As midnight approached, she decided to confess her feelings to Aki before time ran out. However, the penalty arrived. Fortunately, she didn't die, but the price she had to pay was to live in eternal darkness, in other words, permanent blindness. Suddenly, a new order was sent to Aki, stating he would lose something important. The girl, aware of his new order, secretly called his girlfriend to ask about it. When Aki couldn't find the girl, he ran off to search for her, calling Now Da for help. Suddenly, the girl called. She had learned about Aki's order and asked him if she was essential to him. He admitted that she was, but he could always just go home and smash his belongings. However, she realized being blind was harder than she thought, and she also wanted to escape the king's game soon. He then ran back home and smashed everything, hoping to receive the completion message. But there was none. He had to call the girl and lie, saying he had completed it. She only said she wouldn't forget their time together and bid him farewell. He then called his girlfriend, broke up with her, and ran off to find the girl. But when he reached the beach, he only found her phone and a love confession she had rewritten on the sand. She had drifted away with the waves. He searched desperately, only to end up sitting dejectedly on the shore. Then Raya appeared. She mocked the girl for being foolish enough to choose death when the penalty wasn't even death. She tried to provoke him into killing her, still convinced that she was the king. He pushed her down, claiming that if she were truly the king, he would kill her. However, she tased him, stating that if she were truly the king, he would have been long gone with his weak resolve. She vowed to defeat the king, no matter what it took. Aki still clung to the hope of ending the game without any more casualties. Meanwhile, one of Aki's classmates, Dusuki, also began investigating the game, promising not to let their friend, Kaori, die because of it. Overwhelmed with grief as his friends continued to die before his eyes, Aki fell into despair. Suddenly, Dusuki called, revealing that he had noticed a peculiar character in every penalty message sent to the victims. He asked Aki to forward the message from the deceased girl's phone for investigation, along with a request to look into Raya, as she seemed suspicious and knowledgeable about the game. Dusuki shared that Raya used to be cheerful and sociable, but after being abused by her biological father, she had become a different person. He then asked Aki to look after Kaori if anything were to happen to him. A new day arrived, and the game announced that no one was allowed to do anything pointless in the game. This cryptic message led to the immediate punishment of 3 people. Aki called the bespectacled boy who had caused the death of his friend, as he was also being punished. The boy could only utter the word block before suffocating to death. Aki and Now Da realized that some boys in the class had conspired to block the king's number to avoid receiving orders, which was a clear violation of the rule against quitting midway. Others who didn't block the number likely turned off their phones, also considered quitting. Unable to reach his girlfriend, a worried Aki decided to find her. While running, he urged other survivors to avoid doing anything and keep their phones on. However, as soon as he hung up, the girl he had just spoken to was penalized. It dawned on him crying was also prohibited. He frantically called Now Da, instructing him to warn everyone not to cry. Despair washed over Aki as he only wished to see his girlfriend one last time. Dusuki suddenly called, encouraging Aki not to give up and sharing his findings about the village. However, Aki asked him, and Now Da to investigate in his stead. Unfortunately, Dusuki had already cried, sealing his fate. He vowed to send the information to Aki before the penalty took effect. As he struggled to click the mouse, one of his hands was abruptly severed. Determined, he attempted to use his remaining hand to send the files when Kaori called. He tried to answer, but his other hand was also severed. Moments later, Dusuki's body was ripped into pieces. Aki refused to give up just yet. Kaori called, inquiring about Dusuki. He warned her about crying and lied that Dusuki was fine, urging her not to read the message. As he set off for the village, someone knocked him unconscious. He woke up in a warehouse, where Kaori stood, wielding a knife and accusing him of lying and causing Dusuki's death. She believed he was the king. However, Iki revealed that he lied to fulfill Dusuki's wish. He knew both Kaori and Dusuki had feelings for each other, and that she had planned to confess after the game ended. Dusuki had made him promise not to let anyone make her cry. Overwhelmed with emotion upon learning how Dusuki had always protected her, Kaori couldn't hold back her tears. She then suffered a heart attack and passed away. Ria arrived again and saw that he was good at holding back tears. She wanted to know about the information he had just received from Dusuki. Meanwhile, in reality, Mai Dukai went to change to a new phone. As long as she still received messages from the king, she was still safe. The three of them went to the village, and Kenta saw that Aki had suffered a lot. At that time, he only had his girlfriend left, and Kenta also wanted to continue listening. Aki continued to tell his story. At that time, Now Da was very worried about Aki because he couldn't get through to him. A new order arrived. The entire class had to choose one person to roll the dice. The number rolled would determine the number of people chosen for punishment. After the selection, both the roller and the chosen ones would be punished. If no one rolled the dice, everyone would be punished. Now Da didn't know what to do, and the class was panicking. Suddenly, Ria sent a message inviting everyone to the park to roll the dice. Everyone arrived at the park, but Aki and Ria were nowhere to be found. The class bully started to lose his patience and threatened one boy to roll the dice. But this boy was the most hated in class, so the worst-case scenario was that he would be forced to roll. The bully was hated by the whole class. He took the dice and told his close friend to roll instead because he knew if anyone else rolled, he would definitely be chosen. Everyone saw through his cowardly act, knowing that no matter who rolled, he would still be picked. Desperate, he grabbed Aki's girlfriend and held a knife to her throat. To prove he wasn't bluffing, he stabbed her leg, demanding that either Aki or Now Da roll the dice. Aki took the dice, ready to sacrifice himself, but Now Da snatched it away, deciding to take his place. He owed Aki too much and needed him alive to find the king. He rolled the dice, and the worst-case scenario happened. He got a 6. That meant he and 6 other people would be punished. Now Da had 10 minutes to choose. The bully wanted Now Da to name anyone but him. The cowardly boy urged him to name someone absent. But Now Da accidentally named the absent boy, and just like that, one person was chosen. The cowardly boy died instantly from a twisted head. In that instant, friendship crumbled. Now Da then named the absent student and 2 girls the bully hated. But he still needed 2 more names. Both his girlfriend and Aki wanted him to choose them to save the rest. However, the bully's friend suddenly punched him to save Aki's girlfriend and begged Now Da to choose him and the bully instead. Seeing his resolve, Now Da immediately called their names. Just like that, Now Da sent 6 people to their deaths. Now, only he remained. His girlfriend told Aki to go to Now Da. Although terrified, Now Da was happy to have saved his 2 best friends. He then suffered the same fate as Dusuki. One of his arms was severed, followed by the other and finally both legs. Now Da uttered his last words to Aki and died in his arms. Ria then took Now Da's phone and investigated the case. The information Dusuki provided filled the gaps in her investigation. She suspected that the case in the village years ago spread a virus that hypnotized the body and led to self-inflicted, fatal punishments. She believed the trigger for the virus was hidden within the message. Using the data she had, she started programming a program to block the activation signal. Just as she finished, thinking how easy it was, she fell into the king's trap. He activated the punishment and burned Rhea alive. Despite being engulfed in flames, she calmly stepped onto the railing, revealing her reason for saving Aki. It was a precaution. If she died, Aki would be the one to defeat the king. Back in the present, Aki, Kenta, and Mai Du-kai had reached the village. The entrance was blocked, but there was a gap they could slip through. As they entered, Kenta asked about Mai Du-kai's order to send the message. He suggested they have her send it to Natsuko because she would be a problem later, and another girl in their class who was ordered to have a boy in their class touch her hair. Since the chosen boy was dead, the girl was doomed, so sacrificing them would save Mai Du-kai. Aki decided to be ruthless because he couldn't compare the life of an old woman with a child's. Suddenly, Mai Du-kai said that the other end of the tunnel wasn't blocked off. It seemed the authorities were too scared of the village to even get closer. Exiting the tunnel, the three of them were met with the darkness of the forest. Through the forest was the dilapidated village. None of them knew what they would find here or where to begin searching for clues about the game. But then, Aki spotted a house with a nameplate outside and decided to go in. Kenta, not wanting to risk it, told Aki to scream if anything happened. Aki went inside and discovered a photograph, still intact. It was a picture of his girlfriend. This was her parents' house. He found a letter written by his girlfriend's father, apologizing to her. This made Aki suspect that her father was somehow involved in this game. Outside, Kenta suddenly realized he had lost sight of Mai Du-kai. He ran off to find her, but instead, he started receiving messages. The messages announced those who had completed their tasks and revealed that 7 people had already died from the penalties. Overwhelmed with anger, Kenta started yelling. Just then, Mai Du-kai reappeared. She said she had only come to say goodbye. Aki, hearing the commotion, rushed out to find Kenta and Mai Du-kai. He noticed a path leading to the village cemetery. There, he stumbled upon a notebook. As he flipped through it, a photograph slipped out. Shining his light in the direction the picture landed, he found a dried-up corpse. Looking at the photo, he realized it was a young man who looked very much like his girlfriend's father. He still couldn't figure out what the man wanted to apologize to his daughter for. Aki assumed he felt guilty about somehow involving his daughter in the game. However, he then remembered the man had 2 daughters, one of whom was Natsuko. It dawned on him that he had never connected Natsuko's last name to his girlfriend's. He now suspected that Natsuko might have participated in the king's game before. Back with Kenta and Mai Du-kai, feelings had developed between them. She decided to send a message to herself and another to Natsuko, who had once forced her to try and kill Kenta. Mai Du-kai hoped that sending the message to herself wouldn't result in Kenta's death. She confessed her feelings to Kenta and turned to leave, but he chased after her, stopping her in her tracks. He confessed his feelings for her and accepted her love. Mai Du-kai was overjoyed, but then morbid thoughts began to surface. She wished to die alongside Kenta to escape this hell. Kenta, however, reminded her that they had to keep living to hold on to their happiness. Although she wanted him to understand her feelings, he didn't share the same wish. As she was about to run off again, Kenta stopped her and carried her to an area with signal so they could send the message. He chose to send the message to himself, sacrificing himself to save Mai Du-kai. Kenta felt remorse for not being able to continue the journey with Aki. Meanwhile, Aki was trying to find Kenta and Mai Du-kai so they could leave the village. He realized that Kenta must have taken Mai Du-kai to the antenna tower. Knowing Kenta, Aki figured he would send the message to himself to save Mai Du-kai. Back in their own game, the girl Aki had planned to sacrifice was now desperately trying to get the corpse from the chest grab command to react, but the king didn't accept it. Another girl, who had been ordered to throw away her most precious possession, had resorted to killing her parents, but the command was still not approved. She then realized her dog was her most precious belonging but couldn't bring herself to harm it. What unfortunate parents to have a daughter like that. Meanwhile, Aki returned to find Kenta. Kenta had sent the messages to himself and Natsuko, but nothing happened. According to Natsuko, the message had to be sent from the original phone. The replacement phone wouldn't work. It meant Mai Du-kai would suffer the penalty. Kenta decided to stay with Mai Du-kai because he couldn't protect her. The effects of the penalty began to set in, and Kenta couldn't bear to face Aki. He asked Aki to give him and Maidu Kai a moment alone and told Aki to leave. Kenta dragged himself towards Maidu Kai with his remaining strength, hoping Aki would make it to the end of the journey. He regretted not being able to be there with Aki. He apologized to Maidu Kai for breaking his promise. Maidu Kai regained consciousness, the pain of the penalty coursing through her. She reached out for Kenta, but both of them passed away before their hands could meet. Aki then returned and helped both of them be together. Suddenly, he received a call from Netsuko, who was riding a horse under the king's orders and deliberately called to provoke Aki. He was about to ask her something but was interrupted. She began mocking Kenta as a brainless person who would surely die when Miyuki changed phones, yet still risked his life only to lose everything. But she supposed Kenta was still happy dying next to his loved one. He was very angry, but he couldn't act rashly because she was holding his phone. The young man who had just slept with Netsuko, named Teru, had realized how evil she was. He knew Netsuko intended to kill Aki and everyone else, so he planned to stop her. But she had discovered this and came to bang on the door. Teru tried to do something quickly, but Netsuko had already snatched his phone. Amy, hiding outside, had heard everything but chose to remain silent. Aki had reread Netsuko's father's notes and learned that he had also noticed the mutated letters in the orders, which was beyond the king's control, and this could be the key to escaping the game. He realized Ria's theory was correct, so he decided he must collect clues from the victims. Suddenly, a classmate named Riona called him, saying she had some useful information for him and asked him to come to her house. He said he would arrive by noon, so she had to wait. At noon, when he arrived at Riona's house, she complained that he had made her wait too long. She then led Aki to follow her because entering the house might be misunderstood by her parents. They went to the park, and Riona revealed that she had clues from her investigation. She knew that Netsuko had previously participated in a royal game. She had also investigated some things related to Ria. Aki was shocked to hear Ria's name and asked what she knew about Ria, but he had to apologize for being too agitated. She had investigated that Ria had left messages about the characters sent to the victims. Netsuko seemed to know about this, so last night she had checked the devices of those who had died. Riona was also a bit suspicious, so she had taken notes. Aki also had Netsuko's father's notes and realized that those mutated characters were all the same, so previous notes could help this time. He was happy that his friend's sacrifices had not been in vain. Suddenly, Netsuko came to find him and Riona. They didn't know why she came, but Aki had something private to ask her. He asked about her previous participation in the game, so surely she had killed the most important person to her. He then mentioned that he knew her identity and that she was his girlfriend's older sister. She understood that he was trying to use that to make her empathize with him, but it wouldn't work. She wanted him to go to the gathering place because this time's order would allow her to kill him. The rules of this game were that all students would sit in order. They would have to break or cut their fingers to designate points. The number of fingers to designate was optional. Each right finger would add 1 point, left fingers would subtract points, and points could be designated to multiple people. In the end, whoever had negative points would be punished. It might be hard to understand, so let's see it in practice. Aki and Riona were brought to the gathering place. Aki was glad Teru was okay. Teru wanted to say something to Aki but decided not to. Aki still didn't know the rules, so Riona had to show him. Natsuko explained simply that if she broke a finger on her left hand and designated minus points for him, he would have to break a right finger to keep his points at 0. Everyone felt pain just hearing this. Aki noticed there were 11 people left alive, and if arranged in order, Amy, Natsuko's best friend, would be last. Even if the first 10 people maintained their points at 0, if Amy broke a finger to designate someone, someone would definitely die. Teru stood up and asked everyone to make peace, but Netsuko didn't like it. She told Teru to follow her orders, or he would face the consequences. Because Teru's phone was still with Netsuko, he couldn't resist. The young man Ryo sitting next to him understood his feelings from before and decided to tell Aki to trust them because they decided to skip their turns. Aki decided to trust them, and he and another person skipped their turns. Ryo wanted Aki to trust them no matter what was about to happen and not to comment. 2 more people skipped their turns. Natsuko now felt uneasy because the class seemed suspiciously peaceful. Rio also skipped, and only 6 people remained. Then it was Teru's turn. He asked Aki for a favor. He wanted to cut Aki's hair. Natsuko didn't understand what Teru was trying to do, and neither did Aki. But Teru said he would explain later. Teru dreamed of becoming a hairdresser and had plans for after graduation. Natsuko was losing patience, while Aki hoped Teru could live and fulfill his dream. Right after finishing the haircut, Teru asked Aki if he liked the hairstyle. When he heard the answer yes, he broke one of his own right fingers. He did this because he had discussed it with the class beforehand. He would get his phone back by showing Natsuko that she couldn't threaten anyone. As soon as he finished speaking, he pushed Aki aside and picked up a rock to sacrifice his left hand and subtract 5 points from Natsuko. He smashed his left hand and demanded Natsuko return his and Aki's phones, or else these 5 points would go straight to her. If she didn't comply, she would have to break 5 fingers to make up for the points. Natsuko hadn't anticipated this move, and Teru wanted her to decide quickly. If she agreed, Teru would smash his right hand to balance his own points, as his dream was considered lost anyway. Natsuko reluctantly compromised and returned the phones, but Teru still decided to teach her a lesson. He gave the positive points to Aki, 4 negative points to Natsuko, and the remaining negative point to Amy. He had never agreed not to put points on her when getting the phone back. She had concluded that herself. Now, after Natsuko, there were 4 people left. If she could persuade them to sacrifice 1 finger each, she would be safe. That's assuming everyone would sacrifice for Aki like Teru did. I have no words to describe Teru's heroism anymore, my friend. You have earned the respect of all of us. Natsuko was too scared to break her fingers, so she skipped. Teru mocked her for this cowardice. The reason he gave 1 point to Amy was because Amy herself had requested it. Teru wanted to see where this would go. He believed the bones would heal, and now they needed Teru to survive because he was a reliable leader. Then 3 people in a row skipped, leaving only Amy. Natsuko begged Amy to break her right hand for her, but Amy hesitated, making Natsuko decide to do it herself. Originally, Amy had told Teru to give her 1 negative point to see if Natsuko would be willing to sacrifice a finger to save her. If so, she was ready to throw away 4 fingers to save Natsuko. But in the end, Natsuko thought of no one but herself. Natsuko then repeatedly smashed Amy's hand with a rock. Aki had to rush in to push her away. Natsuko thought she was pushing Amy to her limits, believing that when standing on the edge of despair, Amy wouldn't be able to make rational decisions, and then she could easily manipulate Amy. She then told Amy that she could save her. Amy remembered their past promises to each other, and still decided to rush in to push Aki away to save Natsuko. Aki couldn't understand why Amy still chose to save her after witnessing what had just happened. Amy just thought Natsuko was scared, so she acted impulsively like that. Clearly, in just one game, 2 completely opposite people appeared. Amy believed Natsuko was just too desperate, so she acted that way. Amy had kept 4 positive points for Natsuko, but she suddenly grabbed Amy's hand and broke the last finger to take the remaining positive point to add to Amy herself. The game officially ended here. Now I understand why the community who watched this movie cursed Amy the most, not Natsuko. That night, they went to the hospital. Amy was treated, and Aki blamed Natsuko for not changing after this incident. But she thought that even if she changed, it wouldn't matter, and surely the game she had experienced was different from his. Teru then returned and said his left hand was now considered lost, but he didn't regret it. He needed Aki to stay alive and fulfill the dream of stopping this game. He would find a way to fulfill his own dream and cut that hairstyle for Aki again. Teru then asked where Rio was and learned that he was buying a hat for Teru. Rio was the one who wanted to see Teru become a hairdresser the most. They both then returned to the class. Aki said straight out that he had played this game before, and he didn't ask them to trust him, he just wanted them to trust each other. Everyone decided to follow Aki, but Natsuko had returned. She thought they were putting false trust in each other because there was no hope in this deadly game. She had once hoped to save the most important person, but that person had left her, so she'd rather kill people than give false hope to others. A new game then arrived, and Teru was suddenly punished. Blood began flowing from his neck, and no one understood why he was punished. Natsuko revealed she had taken Teru's phone and blocked the king's number to make him be punished. Teru was glad Ryo wasn't here, as Ryo was very timid and wouldn't be able to handle this. Teru then passed away, and he didn't understand how the crazy Netsuko could go this far. She thought Teru had lost his dream and maybe deep down he wanted to die, so she just fulfilled that. Amy now foolishly followed Natsuko without hesitation, making Eki unsure of right and wrong anymore. Ryo later returned and was shocked to the point of madness when he saw Teru's corpse. He kept trying to see if Teru was still alive and asked Eki why Teru wasn't responding. The next order was sent. They had to reach the mountain top, and every 8 hours, whoever was furthest from the goal would be punished. Using vehicles was forbidden. Everyone started running, but Eki, Riona, and Ryo hadn't set off yet. Aki advised Ryo to face reality and not let Teru's soul be troubled anymore. Riona then went ahead with Ryo, while Aki saw Amy still sitting there, having given up hope of living, so he decided to carry her. He wanted her to face Natsuko one more time. He admitted he was a fool for saving her, which made her ask him to put her down. Coming to her senses, Amy decided to run on her own. Meanwhile, among those running ahead, a classmate pulled down a blonde guy for blocking the way. A girl wanted to stay and help, but if they didn't run now, they wouldn't make it in a day. This guy now had to rely on luck and his own abilities to survive, as no one could carry him anymore. The group continued running, while Aki met up with Riona again. Seeing she looked tired, he ran for a while. Riona had a heart-to-heart talk with Amy about how hard Aki was trying. Although Aki ran fast, he maintained a moderate pace to stay close to them, and it seemed he had been through many terrible things. Aki then returned with 2 cans of water for the girls to regain strength. Riona wanted him to run ahead while she would follow. He and Amy ran ahead and met up with the group from before. He wondered where the 2 boys were and heard what had happened. He decided to leave Amy with this group and go back. He met Riona again and realized she couldn't open the water can due to her long nails, so he helped her. They also met the blonde guy who had been pushed down. The 3 of them had to go together, with only 4 hours left before the first punishment. Eki was worried about Riona's physical condition, and he didn't know when the blonde guy would collapse. Natsuko's voice echoed in his head, urging him to leave both behind and save himself. He lost his composure and shouted, causing the other 2 to stop. He said he was just a bit worried. The blonde guy suggested he shouldn't worry about others anymore, but he still called Ryo's group to wish them luck. Aki's group was now left quite far behind, and the other 2 thought Aki should run ahead because if he stayed with them, he wouldn't be able to complete the order. The 3 of them sat down to rest, and Aki saw an image of his girlfriend and reached out. But he had mistaken Riona for his girlfriend and was scolded. The blonde guy suddenly lost consciousness and fell, so Aki jumped down to save him. He tried to pull the guy up, but he was being pulled down deeper, so Aki couldn't save him anymore. He then lost his will, but images of Kenta appeared and encouraged him. Miyuki also encouraged him, Teru kicked him, and his girlfriend reached out to pull him out of the water. He met Riona again, and she was so worried about him that she cried. He then swam to shore and was hugged by Riona. She said it was just to warm him up. She wanted him to be strong and continue running. They then continued their journey, with 4 more islands to go before reaching the goal. If the blonde guy hadn't been counted for punishment, he and Riona would have been. He then waited until close to the punishment time and told Riona to go ahead while he tied his shoelaces, but she stayed to wait for him, and the punishment message arrived. Riona realized Aki did it on purpose, but he simply didn't want to see more friends die. However, lucky for him this time, the blonde guy was still counted and died in the first round. Riona came and slapped Aki for pulling this stupid stunt again. He pretended that he knew the game would count the blonde guy, so what he just did was simply tying his shoelaces and calling her to continue. Although Riona was very angry with Aki, she had to let it go. While Amy's group was still running ahead, the couple Aki and Riona were running and having fun behind. But in just a few minutes, the next punishment would come. Aki realized this and wanted Riona to decide, because now neither of them had overtaken anyone, so one of them would receive the punishment. He knew Riona would object if he volunteered to take the punishment, so he chose rock, paper, scissors so that if he lost, she couldn't complain. He won the game and Riona decided she would take the punishment, but he argued that the winner should have the right to choose, so he would run behind. But she kicked him in the groin and ran ahead. She then stumbled from exhaustion and asked about his ex-girlfriend. She wanted to know what kind of person liked him, because she also wanted to be his girlfriend. She wanted him to stay with her a little longer and apologized for holding him back, but he took the chance to run ahead. Rio was now crying because the person receiving the punishment was Amy. Amy had run back and avoided the path that Aki and Riona would take. She had been enlightened by Aki and decided to use her life to exchange for his. Deep down, Amy still hoped Natsuko would change, and then the punishment came. Aki then returned to Riona. He told her Amy had died, and he thought Riona would kick him again, but no, she just held his hand and cried. This image reminded him of his ex-girlfriend. So while running, Aki asked her if she wanted to hear the end of the previous game or not. He then recounted the story after the dice game and Ria's death. When 12 hours passed, the final order was given. Either he or his girlfriend had to kill the person they loved most, meaning one of the two could live. His girlfriend took out a knife for Aki to do it, but he refused. Although he wanted both to survive, she wouldn't allow him to die, so she stabbed herself. He tried to stop her but couldn't and witnessed the person he loved most pass away. However, even though he was the last survivor, the king still made him choose to continue the game or be punished. Meanwhile, Natsuko had reached the finish line first. She then wanted to see how many people would make it there. The guy who had pushed down the blonde guy earlier arrived and saw the direction sign, ran following it, and stepped into a trap. Natsuko appeared and revealed she had set this trap, then broke the guy's leg to ensure as few people as possible reached the finish line. Then a girl named Duna also arrived at that junction, but there was no sign anymore. Natsuko appeared and gave her directions, but Duna didn't trust Natsuko, so she took the other path. However, Natsuko had actually pointed correctly, knowing Duna wouldn't trust her and go the other way. Aki and Riona had now met up with Rio and the girl with glasses. They said the others had gone ahead. The girl in yellow named Rina was also running endlessly without finding the way and met the guy with the broken leg. He begged Rina for help, but she refused, wanting him to understand what the blonde guy had gone through. She then ran off and met Duna again. Because Duna hadn't trusted and now couldn't find the way, she decided to try following Natsuko's directions. Duna suddenly slipped and was about to fall off the mountain. Rina saw but didn't want to help for fear of being pulled down too. Rina then reached the finish line and met Natsuko again, but Natsuko didn't want anyone but herself to survive, so she started to play mind games with Rina. Rina began to see images of the people she had left behind haunting her. She backed away for a moment and then slipped and fell off the mountain. Aki's group now heard cries for help and ran quickly to investigate. However, with only 1 minute left, Natsuko stood in their way. Aki ran straight into her to let Riona and Rio reach the finish line first. Both made it in time, and Aki and the girl with glasses also made it just in time. Rio checked and found only 5 people had reached the finish line. 3 people who should have been ahead of them had died. He knew Natsuko was behind this. Suddenly, he was hit on the head and knocked out by Rio, because today's order was to cut off limbs and head to make a human figure. Rio wanted to sacrifice himself to help Aki as Teru had helped him, and had to knock Aki out so he couldn't interfere. Natsuko then found a chainsaw for him, and he started cutting into his own leg, but got stuck, so Natsuko pushed down. However, Rio died on the spot from the extreme pain. The girl with glasses woke up and, seeing Rio dead, tried to strangle Natsuko, but was quickly cut down by her. She then planned to eliminate Riona as well. Riona called for Aki's help, and he regained consciousness. She informed him about the order and couldn't understand why Rio had followed this terrible command. Riona explained that Rio had desperately wanted to become strong, but to Aki, Rio had already shown great strength in making it this far. Despite his small stature, his perseverance was admirable, and he had even encouraged everyone along the way. The order to create a human figure could now be fulfilled as only one person's death was required. Aki still wanted to cooperate with Natsuko to overcome this game. Riona showed Natsuko the clues from the letters. Natsuko had noticed something similar at her old school and had her own clues, but she had collected this information to help herself survive, never intending to overcome the game or defeat the king. They then tried to piece the letters together, revealing that the game would continue as long as there were survivors. Only when everyone died would the game end. Aki realized they had never been meant to survive. But Natsuko didn't like this revelation. She only cared about her own survival, regardless of whether the game continued or not. If everyone had to die, she decided Aki would be the first to go. She then grabbed Aki. Riona tried to help but was kicked aside. Natsuko tried to strangle him, but he kicked her away. However, she lunged at him again, choking him until he foamed at the mouth. Riona grabbed the saw and rushed to stab her to death. Riona claimed Iki was hers and no one should harm him. She wanted him to focus on her because it was thanks to him that she had lived until now. Yet somehow, Natsuko was still alive. She rushed over with the saw and cut through Aki's neck to drag him along. She admitted she also really liked Aki, but she would rather die with him than let someone else do it later. Riona still wanted to find a way to stop the bleeding to save Aki, but it was too late. He hoped she would live well afterwards and passed away. However, while Aki and his friends were on their way to the afterlife, in the real world, Riona dragged his body to the beach. She knew this was her selfish wish, but it was better than continuing to live alone. She kissed Aki and then took his body into the sea to go with him. Thus, the royal game ended. But no, at some school out there, the game had started again. In the end, nothing was resolved, and the movie was over. Goodbye.